The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the Pierce family ranch was how cold it felt, despite the roaring fire in the stone hearth. It wasn't the temperature, it was the silence, the kind of silence that sticks to your skin. I'd grown up here, but walking through the front doors always felt like stepping onto a stage where I'd never learned my lines. My name is Alana Pierce. I'm 34 years old, and I live in Phoenix with my 8-year-old son, Caleb. This holiday weekend was supposed to be a chance to reconnect, though reconnecting with my family always felt more like walking barefoot on broken glass. Alana, my mother said when I entered, her voice tight but polite, as if she was greeting a stranger she vaguely remembered from a high school reunion. She gave a quick nod at Caleb, who was half hidden behind my coat, clutching his toy spaceship like a shield. She didn't bend down to hug him. My mother, Patricia Pierce, didn't do hugs. Not anymore. "Hi, Mom," I replied, forcing a smile as I handed off our coats. The estate hadn't changed, the dark wood walls lined with dusty portraits of grim-faced ancestors, the stern-looking Western paintings, the air of old money that never welcomed softness. It was the kind of place where footsteps echoed, where even the carpet felt stiff. My father, Henry Pierce, appeared in the dining room doorway. He was tall, shoulders still broad even in his 60s, with a face carved into permanent disapproval. "You're late," he said, not bothering with hello. I swallowed a sigh. Traffic was rough coming out of Phoenix. He turned on his heel without responding. That was about as warm as it got. Dinner was worse. Nathaniel, my older brother, had already started showing off his twin daughters, both dressed like they'd stepped out of an ad for designer children's clothes. His wife, Serena, beamed with pride as the girls plucked out a shaky rendition of Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star on their tiny violins. Everyone clapped like we'd just witnessed a miracle. I smiled and tried to engage. "They're getting so good," I said, leaning toward Serena. "Caleb just started piano lessons." "Oh, how nice," Serena interrupted with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Well, not every kid can stick with music, but that's okay." Caleb shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I reached for his hand under the table. I tried a few more times to join the conversation. A funny story from our road trip, something about my work, but my words just floated there, ignored. Nathaniel only spoke to me when he wanted to casually slip in how well his investments were doing. "You'd be surprised how easy it is if you're disciplined," he said with a smirk, as if discipline was all it took to be him. The eruption came halfway through dinner, just after Caleb asked if he could have another roll. My father set his fork down with a clatter. "Do you ever think about what kind of example you're setting for that boy?" His voice cut through the clinking of silverware. "Single mother, bouncing from job to job. You're a disgrace, Alana. A Pierce should have more sense." I froze, the words slicing through me even though I'd heard them all my life. "Dad, Don't dad me," he barked, his face flushed. "You're 34 and still living like some lost girl who can't get her life together. No husband, no real home. What do you even have to show for yourself?" My mother didn't look at me. She stared at her plate as if it held the answer to everything. Nathaniel just sipped his wine, lips twitching like he wanted to smirk, but knew better. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself not to cry. Not here. Caleb looked between us, confused and small. "Grandpa?" he whispered, but my father ignored him. For a moment, I wanted to stand, to scream back. Instead, I just sat there, my hand gripping Caleb's until my knuckles turned white, feeling the years of tension between us snap tighter than ever. No one came to my defense, not a single person. And that told me everything I needed to know about this family. The room was so quiet I could hear the faint ticking of the clock above the fireplace. My father's words still hung in the air like smoke. A disgrace. I didn't argue, didn't cry. Instead, I stood slowly, my chair scraping against the hardwood. "Caleb," I said softly. He slid off his chair without hesitation, his toy spaceship clutched tightly in his hand. No one moved. Nathaniel glanced at me briefly, like he might say something, but he didn't. Serena stared at her wine glass as if it held a map out of this awkward silence. My mother just kept cutting her steak into tiny, perfect pieces, never once looking at me. I grabbed Caleb's jacket from the hall closet, kneeling to zip it up for him. "We're leaving, sweetheart." Behind me, my father's voice rang out again, sharp and final. "You're nothing without this family." I didn't even turn around. His words couldn't touch me anymore. As we walked toward the front door, I caught sight of the things they thought were theirs. The manicured rose garden, the perfectly paved driveway with the custom tile work, the stables housing horses, none of them actually rode. I knew every corner of that estate, knew how much it cost to maintain. And I knew the truth none of them would ever suspect. All of it had been funded, in one way or another, by me. I put Caleb in his booster seat, tightening the strap as he looked up at me with wide, uncertain eyes. "Are we in trouble, Mom?" he asked. "No," I said, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "We're free." The engine rumbled to life, and the Grand Pierce Ranch faded in the rearview mirror. The house looked impressive in the glow of the porch lights, but to me it felt like an empty stage set, a place built on appearances and coldness. As the road curved toward the highway, I felt no sadness, no pull to look back. Just a sharp, unexpected relief. Caleb yawned in the back seat, spaceship still in hand. "Where are we going now?" "Home," I said, watching the dark Arizona night stretch ahead of us. "Someplace better." For the first time all evening, I smiled. By the time Caleb and I reached Phoenix, the city lights felt like a soft landing after the suffocating darkness of the ranch. I parked in the underground garage of my loft, a sleek industrial space in the heart of downtown that I'd bought under a holding company. To my family, I was just barely making ends meet in some modest rental. Let them believe that. It was easier than explaining the truth. Once Caleb was asleep, spaceship still clutched in his small hand, I sat at my kitchen island with my laptop. For years I'd hidden behind a carefully constructed facade, letting my family assume I was struggling, that my life was defined by mistakes. The truth was stranger to them, and far more satisfying. I had built an empire they didn't even know existed. 5 years ago, I'd been a single mom with a secondhand laptop in my garage, desperately trying to turn an idea into something real. Root started as a small platform connecting eco-conscious brands with independent shippers willing to use sustainable routes. Back then, I'd cold-called potential partners while Caleb napped in a stroller beside my desk. I knew I had something, but I didn't know how big it could get. Now Root operated across Europe and Southeast Asia, with hundreds of contracts and clients who valued quiet efficiency. I had chosen not to attach my name to the company's public side. I preferred to remain invisible, letting my team handle press releases and PR under a generic CEO alias. The less attention I drew, the freer I felt. I opened my financial dashboard, watching rows of numbers and accounts light up the screen. It still amazed me. The girl they once mocked for never sticking to anything had grown this from scratch. Every partnership, every deal, every piece of code tested late at night. My success was quiet, strategic, and hidden, but it was mine. Scrolling through the autopay list, I saw them all, the ranch mortgage in my parents' name, paid monthly without their knowledge of where the funds came from. Nathaniel's failed startup had been rescued not once but twice by anonymous investors, me. Even their health insurance had my fingerprints all over it, routed through shell accounts to keep my name off the paperwork. I stared at those numbers for a long time, remembering the way my father's voice cracked with contempt at dinner. "You're nothing without this family." He had no idea that everything holding their precious estate together came from me. It wasn't pride that filled my chest now. It was clarity. I didn't owe them another cent. One by one, I began cutting the lifelines. I canceled the automated transfers, halted the monthly property tax payments, shut down the corporate credit card Nathaniel used for business travel that always looked like luxury vacations. The clicks felt like freedom, each confirmation message a small victory. When I reached the last transfer, my parents' medical bills, I hesitated only for a moment. I'd done enough. They had never once asked if I was okay, if I needed help. Why should I keep cushioning their lives while they tore mine apart with words? I clicked cancel and sat back, exhaling like I'd been holding my breath for years. The loft was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. I glanced at Caleb sleeping on the couch, his face soft and peaceful, and I realized that this, him, us, was the only family that mattered. I'd spent so long funding the people who belittled me that I'd forgotten how powerful it felt to choose where my energy and money went. Tonight, I reclaimed all of it, and I wasn't looking back. 2 days after cutting my family off, I booked 2 one-way tickets to Kauai. I didn't overthink it. I just opened the airline app, scrolled past all the excuses I could have made, and hit purchase. By the time the plane lifted off the Phoenix runway, Caleb was pressed against the window, pointing out the clouds like they were new planets. I watched him, realizing how rarely I'd let myself enjoy the simple wonder of just being alive. The flight was long but quiet. I kept imagining my parents at the ranch, checking the accounts I'd closed, wondering why the financial world they relied on suddenly went dark. The thought no longer made me feel guilty. If anything, I felt lighter, like I'd peeled off a mask I'd been wearing for years. When we landed, the air itself felt different, warm, salt-scented, and alive. A private driver took us up the winding road to a modern cliffside villa I had bought years ago, tucked away behind a curtain of palm trees and hibiscus blooms. No one knew about it, not even my closest friends. I'd bought it during the early success of Root, as a promise to myself. One day, I'll live on my terms. That day had finally come. The house was a sharp contrast to the ranch I'd grown up in. All white stone and glass, open rooms filled with sunlight. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked turquoise waves crashing against black volcanic rock. Wild orchids grew along the fence line, their purple petals swaying gently in the breeze. For once, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself to fit in. This place wasn't for show. It was for us. Caleb kicked off his shoes the moment we arrived and ran barefoot through the yard, laughing when he spotted a waterfall just beyond the property line. "Mom, look, there are chickens here." He pointed to a few feral birds strutting through the grass like they owned the place. His excitement was contagious. "Want to help me feed them later?" I asked. "Yeah. Can I name them?" "Go for it," I said, watching him race toward the garden. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen him so free, so unburdened. The days that followed were slow and sweet. We ate breakfast on the beach, just the two of us with sandy toes and pineapple slices still warm from the sun. Afternoons were spent reading in hammocks, the sound of waves replacing the constant hum of tension I'd grown used to. Caleb would build sand castles until dusk while I sat nearby, breathing in the salt air and wondering how I'd gone so long without this kind of peace. At night, we'd fall asleep to the sound of the ocean through open windows. For the first time in years, I wasn't rehearsing conversations with my family in my head or feeling like I had something to prove. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I was simply free. One evening, as the sun sank into the horizon, Caleb snuggled beside me on the deck. "Can we live here forever?" he asked. I looked out at the endless blue, the horizon melting into gold. "Maybe we just might," I whispered. And for the first time, I meant it. The first week in Kauai, I didn't open my laptop once. I didn't check emails or scan spreadsheets. Instead, I sat on the lanai in the early mornings, listening to waves hit the rocks, letting my mind wander for the first time in years. There was something both strange and healing about the silence. It forced me to hear myself again. I bought a simple leather-bound journal from a local shop and began writing. At first, it felt awkward, like I was trying to speak a language I'd forgotten. But soon the words started flowing. I wrote about the girl I used to be before root consumed my life. I wrote about the things I wanted, not the things I thought I should want. Pages filled quickly, fragments of poetry, memories I hadn't touched in a decade, stories I never dared to share. One evening, while Caleb was building rock towers near the shoreline, I sat in a hammock with my pen and just wrote whatever came to mind. No deadlines, no business strategies, just me. The freedom felt intoxicating. At night, I'd walk barefoot along the beach with Caleb, our feet sinking into the cool sand as we searched for shells. He seemed lighter here too, less timid, more curious. I noticed it in the way he laughed, freely, with no trace of the tension he'd pick up around my family. He was blooming, just like me. Some evenings, I'd tuck him into bed and step outside to stare at the stars. I'd forgotten how endless the sky could feel when you aren't weighed down by other people's expectations. I realized I didn't need to fix myself. I wasn't broken. I was whole. I was resilient. Everything I'd built, everything I'd endured, had shaped me into someone my family would never truly understand. By the second week, a new idea began to take root. I'd spent so long giving money out of obligation, bailing out people who only saw my value in numbers. What if I started giving intentionally, on my own terms, to people who truly needed it? The thought stayed with me as I watched Caleb place the final stone on his tower one afternoon. He turned to me with a grin, his hair sticking up from the wind. "Look, Mom, it's taller than me," I laughed, feeling something stir in my chest, the same determination that had once pushed me to build root. Only this time, I didn't want to build for profit. I wanted to build for meaning. I started jotting ideas in my journal, programs for single mothers, microgrants for small businesses, digital training for women like me who needed a way out. The more I wrote, the clearer it became. I was done reacting to my family's needs. It was time to create something that mattered, something that wasn't tied to guilt or shame. When I closed the journal that evening, I felt a quiet certainty. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was finally ready to live on my own terms. The idea had been circling my mind for days, like a tide that kept pulling me back to the same shore. One morning, after breakfast on the patio, I sat with my laptop and a fresh notebook, sketching out what would become Harbor Light. The name came to me instantly. I wanted it to feel like a beacon, a safe place for women who, like me, had once stood alone, unsure how to rebuild their lives. I started with 3 pillars: microgrants, legal aid, and digital job training. Small, practical steps that could give single mothers a fighting chance. I remembered the years when every dollar counted, when I juggled late-night coding with diaper changes and prayed Caleb would sleep long enough for me to finish a client call. Those memories didn't haunt me anymore. They fueled me. By mid-afternoon, I had typed up a rough mission statement and a budget. I transferred $1.2 million from one of my investment accounts into a new foundation fund. Watching the numbers shift felt different this time. It wasn't about duty or guilt, like it had been with my family. It was about purpose. I called a legal team I trusted, asking them to draw up documents for a nonprofit corporation. "It's called Harbor Light," I said, and I couldn't help the smile in my voice. "I want it to be ready to launch in 6 months. The lawyer on the other end paused. "This sounds like something close to your heart." It is, I replied. It's the first thing I've done entirely for myself, and for people who actually need it. Inside the villa, Caleb's laughter floated through the open windows. He was building a fort with beach towels and asking the chickens if they wanted to join. I stared at my screen, the draft of a grant application template open, and felt tears prick my eyes. For years, my wealth had been drained into people who mocked me, who saw me as nothing but a source of cash. Now, every dollar would go somewhere meaningful. I wiped my eyes and whispered to myself, "This is the life I was meant to build." By sunset, I had outlined the first steps: outreach to community centers, a network of volunteer mentors, and a small board of women entrepreneurs I trusted. It wasn't just a plan, it was the start of something alive. When Caleb came running to me, holding a seashell shaped like a heart, I hugged him tight. "What's this for?" I asked. "Because you look happy," he said simply. And he was right. For the first time in years, I felt joy that wasn't tied to someone else's approval. It was mine, and I wasn't giving it back. It was a golden afternoon when my phone rang, the light spilling across the kitchen floor in streaks of amber. I almost didn't answer when I saw the caller ID. Mom. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but something in me said to pick up. "Alana." Her voice trembled. I need to talk to you." I leaned against the counter. "I'm listening." There was a pause, then a flood of words. "Your father and I are in trouble. The ranch, we're behind on payments. Nathaniel said he can't help this time. We thought the accounts were, but now," her voice cracked, "we need you. Please." I closed my eyes. She still doesn't know. "Mom," I said slowly, "how do you think all those payments were being made?" "What do you mean?" she whispered. "Every mortgage payment, the property taxes, the insurance. Who do you think kept that going all these years?" My tone wasn't angry, just steady. "It was me. I paid for all of it, and you never even noticed." There was silence on the line. Then a sharp inhale, followed by sobs. "You? No, that can't. Alana, why didn't you say anything?" "Because you never saw me," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You saw a failure, a single mother, a disappointment. But while you were busy looking down on me, I was building a company from nothing. I was building the life you said I'd never have." She tried to speak, but her voice shook. "I didn't know. Oh God, I'm so sorry. I should have." "Mom," I interrupted gently, "I'm not telling you this to hurt you. I'm telling you because things are going to change. I'm not paying for the ranch anymore. I'm not funding Nathaniel's bad investments. I'm done being invisible while keeping everyone afloat." There was a pause, then a desperate plea. "Please, Alana, don't cut us off. I didn't realize how much we relied on you. I'll talk to your father. We'll make this right. Just forgive me." I took a deep breath, looking out at the ocean through the window. "I don't need you to make it right. I need you to understand that I won't be treated like I'm nothing, not when I was the reason you stayed comfortable for so long. I'll always be honest with you, but I'm not going back to that old pattern." Her crying softened. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she said quietly. I hesitated. "I don't know what I can give you right now, but I can give you this: respect, as long as it goes both ways." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "I see you now. I should have seen you all along." I felt something loosen inside me. Not reconciliation, but a shift. For the first time, my voice had weight with her, and I wasn't drowning under guilt anymore. When I hung up, Caleb came into the kitchen, holding a seashell. "Who was that, Mom?" "Just the past calling," I said with a small smile. "But I think I finally answered the right way." The days after my mother's call passed quietly, as if the island itself was holding me in a calm embrace. I didn't expect to hear from my father. Silence had always been his way. So when a small envelope arrived, handwritten with my name, I almost didn't open it. Inside, on plain stationery, were just a few words. I don't say it often, but we're proud. Do what makes you happy. There was no signature, but I knew it was his. For a moment, I just sat there on the balcony, letter in hand, staring out at the sea. It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it felt real in a way my father rarely allowed himself to be. A day later, Nathaniel sent a text. I'm sorry for not saying anything that night. Serena and I want to talk sometime. By the way, Lucy drew a picture of you and Caleb. She calls it Supermom and Space Captain. Attached was a crayon drawing of me holding Caleb's toy spaceship, both of us smiling under a big, uneven rainbow. I laughed, something soft catching in my throat. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Back in Hawaii, life took on a rhythm that felt effortless. Harbor Light's website went live, and within days, the first applications began to arrive. Letters from women I'd never met, single mothers in small towns, women clawing their way out of situations I recognized all too well. They thanked me for creating a program that saw them as capable, not broken. I read every word, tears blurring my vision. Caleb was sprawled on the hammock one afternoon, napping with his spaceship tucked under his arm. The waves crashed just below the balcony, steady and endless. I looked at him, then at the inbox filled with messages from women reaching out for hope, and felt something inside me settle. For years I'd built everything for people who never truly saw me. Now, I was building for something much larger, for those who needed light in their darkest moments. That evening, Caleb woke up and shuffled onto the balcony, hair sticking up in wild curls. What are you smiling about, Mom? Just thinking about how good life feels right now, I said, pulling him close. He yawned. Do you think we'll stay here forever? I kissed the top of his head. I think we'll stay as long as it makes us happy. As the sun dipped into the horizon, the last light spilling gold across the ocean, I thought about the girl who had once walked out of that Arizona ranch feeling like a failure. That girl didn't exist anymore. I was someone new, someone whole, someone free. I folded my father's letter and tucked it into my journal. Maybe one day, I'd answer Nathaniel's message or visit Arizona again. But it wouldn't be out of obligation or guilt. It would be because I wanted to. For now, Hawaii, Caleb, and Harbor Light were my world. And as I leaned back, listening to the waves and the quiet breath of my sleeping son, I realized I finally felt complete.